So when I first read Bridget's work, Bridget Cook is right here, and Shoghig Halajian is right there. So when I first read Bridget's work, I was struck by the threads she managed to weave together. The politics, the economics, the structural inequities of exhibitions and exhibition practices, alongside perhaps actually inseparable from the aesthetics, the projects, and the labor that the artists that she turns her attention towards move through. And Shoghig Halajian makes exhibitions and exhibition projects that push at what it means to exhibit, what it means to be an audience or a participant in and with an artist's work. There's a hope in her practice that work and art and the politics of both might open up to and onto wider publics with ever expanding notions of what it means to see, to view, to witness, and be with. So they're going to speak now.
So I'm Bridget Cooks. I'm one of Latia's colleagues in art history and African American studies at UC Irvine. And I'm setting a timer for myself for 15 minutes. And then I'm going to stop and then see if anybody wants to talk about anything. So thank you to Latia. This was a super idea to get everybody together. I'm trained as an art historian, and I've also been called a cultural historian because I'm really interested in politics and cultural history in my work. I think the kind of writing that I do requires a lot of code switching, and I think as a Black woman in academia, there's a lot of code switching anyway. So I end up having to do this kind of performance in my scholarship as well. In some ways, the kind of things that I produce are acts of translation in conversations with artists, and then finding out what they want to be in print, because we know that if there's no catalog or there's no reviews or a booklet, then it's as if it never happened. So I feel a lot of responsibility working with artists to try to document the fact that they exist in the world, that they have a thinking practice, that they have things to say, and I have to figure out in some ways how to translate what they do into words. And other times there are things that just should not be translated, and you can't translate the visual into the words, so there's limits there. And it's important, I think, also to respect what I do and respect what the artists do and not try to force something that isn't there. So I will say that I was an undergraduate student also at UC Irvine. I had no idea I'd ever end up there again as a full-fledged adult. And I was a studio major and an art history major, and I was there when this wave of CalArts professors came in the late 80s, early 90s. So Catherine Lord, Daniel Martinez, who was the most influential educator I've ever had in my life. He is the most influential educator in my life. And when I decided to go to graduate school, I went to two places to visit, Northwestern and University of Rochester, two of the coldest places I'd ever been in my life. And I decided that I didn't want to go to graduate school because I didn't want to live in the snow. And I told Danny that. And Danny told me that he needed me to go to graduate school. He said, we need people who get it to write about what we do. And I think this was in '93. The biennial was still up, and he came to one of my classes to talk about this project and invite a bunch of the undergrads to go with him to New York to help him install his show at the Whitney. We were very young and had no idea how amazing that opportunity was. I couldn't afford to go to New York, but the kinds of art that he was making had a big influence on me. He has a show that recently opened at Robertson Tilton right now. And the fact that you could engage in institutional criticism as an artist was very powerful for me. So I wanted to just show some of Danny's work, because this symbolizes for me why I became ultimately a writer. I had no idea that's what being a professor was, but it is. I worked in museums for a number of years and got a good idea of all the drama behind the scenes, how exhibitions are put together, how poor the representation of Black artists. has been historically, and there was no record of that. And so I wrote a book. This is the cover, exhibiting Blackness, African Americans in the American Art Museum, in which I tried to talk about some of the politics that Latia was talking about in my work. Racial politics, economic politics, hierarchies of high and low art, the myth of the outsider artist, those kinds of things. And I did a lot of interviews with artists and curators and other administrators to try to figure out how to tell the story. And even though I was dealing with, factual information, there was a lot of interpretation. There's so many different ways to tell the story, and I had to make some hard decisions. And there are people that I interviewed for the book who are deceased now, and I had to pull out my ratty pleather purple jacket for today in tribute. People that have passed on who told me, I've been waiting for someone to ask me these questions. No one ever asked me what it was like to put an exhibition together at LACMA in 1976 as a Black man. Write this down, There was a lot of things that were off the record, but more so it was on the record. Please put this in your book. Please tell people that this is how it happened. So I felt a lot of responsibility to do this work. And I'm just going to show you some images of art that connect with my art writing. So this is a photograph by a man who told me, write this down, make sure this is published before I die. A photographer named Lloyd Yearwood, who's based in Harlem. And he was a photographer that exhibited in this notorious Harlem on My Mind show from 1969. And this photograph had never been published before. He also was not represented in the catalog. This was a highly contested show. There's 4 different catalogs for the show. A lot of drama behind the scenes. And he was asked kind of at the last minute to show some photographs from the 1960s. And his photographs were all taken in Chicago. The show was on Harlem, but he said the curators didn't ask. They just wanted his pictures. He followed Malcolm X around Chicago. He photographed mosques in Chicago. So this work by him was in the exhibition, was not Harlem. No one knew that. And he was asked to put his work in the last minute, and so he's not recognized in the catalog. So it was really important for him that I try to tell his story. I've also done some writing around the women who quilt in Gee's Bend, Alabama. And this was one of the more sort of politically fraught projects that I had a very strong perspective on how to tell the story. But this is an issue of racial difference and class difference when it comes to these women exhibiting their work at the Whitney Museum, which is where their first major exhibition happened, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, also the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco. And being in people's houses, being in the spaces where they make art has a big influence on me. And one of the challenges of writing is to bring that kind of intimacy into your writing, but also, in a way, being aware of how it might be perceived by other people. So, let's see, to be more specific, the quilters said that the reason why they quilt has nothing to do with the history of abstract expressionism, like the catalog says. It has nothing to do with great white male modernist artists showing in New York in the 50s. They are Christians. They sing Christian songs when they quilt. It's a process of psychic healing. It's a functional object that they make. The only reason they went to their openings is so that they could sing about Jesus in front of the quilts. So how do you take that story, which is so anti-art world values, and try to get people who are involved in the sort of mainstream art world to really hear the story the way that you're telling it? So there's a lot of, like Latia said, labor that goes into trying to figure out how to translate one story to a different audience. And also wanting to be protective and respectful of the kinds of ways in which people let me into their house. Some other writing I did about the first exhibition of African American artists at LACMA called 2 Centuries of Black American Art. And this is the person I was thinking about, David Driscoll, who was the curator for that exhibition and just had amazing stories of how he was able to break the color line in that space in 1976. And he told me to write a lot of things down also. I'm showing you a still when he was on the Today Show in 1976 with Tom Brokaw in front of an artwork called Haitian Market by William Smith. And this was an important moment to show African Americans art artists. They make all kinds of work, and to have it publicly broadcast in the media in this way was a very big deal. And so this was something that I wanted to share and to try to get people to understand how important that moment really was. Many African American people who have some influence in any way, we regularly get death threats. And so Driscoll got a number of death threats because he wanted to include the artwork of John J. Audubon in the 2 Century show. So Audubon, the naturalist, his mother was a free woman of color in New Orleans. And he, according to American laws, that makes you black. And so he says, I'm going to put Audubon's work in the show. Descendants, people who had Audubon as their ancestor, were very against this happening. A great-great-great-grandson of Audubon, his wife was pregnant, and he hadn't told his wife that he had black blood, and he was afraid that the kid was going to come out with kinky hair, and said, if you put Audubon on the show, my wife will divorce me. That's a story that needs to be told, and a story that he said, write this down. In a way, I think that for me, writing is a lot like teaching, in the sense that you can't say, I feel the pressure, such a pressure that I feel like I can't say what I want to say the way I want to say it. I have to do a lot of structuring and put a lot of forethought into thinking about how this might be heard, because I want the person to hear what I'm saying. And if I say it the way I just want to say it, I think they're going to shut down. So that's something that I deal with all the time in teaching, and then something that is a part of the process of writing about art and the history of exhibitions. And just another shot of that. I got a chance to do some writing about a number of other artists. I'm just going to show you quickly because I'm near the end of the time I'm allotting myself. Feng Ben, who's an amazing artist who lives in central China, who makes these really captivating, I think I'm out of order, here we go, I'll go back. Really captivating paintings on silk of people in China dancing in city squares. And so I was really interested in issues of affection between strangers, ritual fantasies of romantic love that happen in the cities, public performance, the colors in his work, the shadows that he was creating also in his work, and sense of uncertainty and intensity of feeling in his work. And I was able to do some writing about his work that I think required a certain type of tenderness that is not promoted in academic writing, so this made me do something quite different. Another artist, now I'll go back, is Titus Kafar, who I knew when he was an undergraduate student, who is a painter. This is a photograph of him. This is an installation from last year at the Studio Museum. He has a great interest in family relationships, and how complex they are. And I'd given him a book of daguerreotypes that featured African American people, and he started making paintings where he remade these photographs. So this is an actual daguerreotype showing the mammy of 2 generations of white people in this family, and then Titus doing his remake of it where he was asking us to think about different kinds of relationships and bonds between the help/property and the owners. And so in this process, these are other remakes of famous paintings that he's done to help us think differently about constructions of family. So in the process of writing about this work, artists can be difficult, and they can also be really generous and sort of say, like, this is where this work is coming from. And again, it's a moment for me where I feel very honored to be in a kind of rarefied space with someone that's willing to tell me something about themselves that's very personal. And I then have the challenge in writing and how to bring that out into the work. With artists of color, sometimes they say, please write about my work in relationship to the history of Black artists. And other artists will say, please write about my work and don't mention any other Black artists. Talk about me in relationship to Pollock. Talk about me in relationship to Stella. And so there's also some decisions I have to make there in thinking about the politics of the art world and how I resent the fact that I understand that the artists don't want me to talk about them in relationship to other Black artists, that they're trying to get their work seen not as Black art, but as art by someone who's Black. So this is something that's been debated since Langston Hughes wrote the Negro Artist in the Racial Mountain. This is something that is a debate that's not going to go away. I'll just show you a couple of other things. More work by Titus, Feng Ben we looked at. I also got interested in thinking about the concept of Blackness outside of the United States. This will be the last artist I'll show. This is work by Tony Albert, who's a very young, incredible, ridiculously talented Aboriginal artist working in, I think he's in Brisbane now. And so the work I'm showing you, rearranging our history, these are paintings on velvet, working with kitsch images and objects, sort of objectifying Aboriginal people. It was the first time I had left the country and talked to people who, to me, were not Black, who said, we're Black too. And so that took a minute. For me to spend time with Tony and talk about what Blackness means in Australia. Just some more of his work, sharing some images of some of the traditions in his family, making traditional shields with motifs that are important for his particular cultural group, and bonding experiences between men. And so needing to just be a good listener, to stretch and learn about different cultures is also part of the decisions I make about writing that really do change who I am as a person. So I think I am going to stop there. I think there's 20 more slides, but if anybody wants to ask any questions or talk about, I heard with the other panelists that were up here, vulnerability. It's yeah, I get that all the time. Feeling very vulnerable and wanting to respect the material that you've been given access to. Yeah.
I have a question about the fellow who had the photographs in the Harlem on My Mind show, and included at the last minute.
Yeah.
And then I assume he's not in the catalog because it had already gone to press, right? Something like that?
He's not in the catalog.
Yeah,
because it had already gone to press, yes.
Yeah, and so, and then he puts in Chicago and no one really looks at his work well enough to not notice what's going on, right?
It's not Harlem.
That's pretty shocking. But then what's also shocking is that no one...
No, I talked to him, and he said they didn't ask. He thought those were his strongest pictures, and they, as far as he knew, no one noticed.
So then does he know why he was included? Was it just when somebody else dropped out? Why was he included?
So at this time, in the late 60s, around this exhibition, it had already, before it opened, it was there were people demonstrating against it opening in a segregated fashion. There were black people who had organized against the opening of the show, and there were Jewish people that had organized against the show. And there was a lot of criticism about the show, even though no one had seen it. And one of the criticisms was that the Met, this was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the first show they ever did that included black people, and the first show they ever did, and the last show that didn't have any art in it. And one of the accusations against the Met was that the Met was trying to appear socially relevant, but it wasn't. Right. And so they decided to make a last-ditch effort to be socially relevant by extending the time period of the dates that were addressed in the exhibition to the late 60s. And so they found Lloyd and said, "You have some stuff that's really recent." And he said, "Yeah, I have some stuff that's recent." And they said, "Okay, well, we want it for the show." So that's why it happened.
Yeah. I had one other question. Oh, yeah, the cover photo of your book.
Yeah.
The cover photo of the exhibiting blackness. Where'd you get the photo?
Well, so this was a photo shoot that I curated, or directed, I think would be the better word. I worked at LACMA for 5 years. It was my local museum. And so this is shot in one of the American galleries. So I'm the person who's blurry. Abraham Agonafir, whose people should recognize from LACMA, he's been there for over 20 years, is off to the side.
Yeah.
And then my parents are there. And
it felt like a constructed photograph.
yes, it is, because I couldn't find any pictures of black people in
I
the
was gonna
museum.
ask.
They just don't exist.
Yeah.
And so I talked to a curator there and said, "Can we just make one?" And so
I think that's kind of a noteworthy thing that you made the photograph. First off, I
Yes.
love the photo.
okay, thank you.
And I love that you're a blur. And I didn't know those were your parents, but I knew instantly that was a setup.
Yeah.
And I thought, how interesting that you needed to make the photo.
Yeah, well, it was out of necessity. I mean, of course, I could have picked an artwork by someone, but
No.
I
This is
wanted
the
to-
point. It's a really
Yeah.
great photo.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thanks.
I don't mean to monopolize.
Latia, cut us off at any time.
Oh, sorry, I've got a question. Thanks, Bridget,
Oh,
so
hi.
much. That was
Okay.
really amazing presentation.
Thank you.
I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about your experiences in Australia.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of history there.
Well, what are you thinking about with Australia?
Well, I guess just the parallels in the black experience and the articulation of blackness in
Yeah.
Aboriginal culture, I guess.
Well, so, Aboriginal people are considered black socially, and in legislation, that's the term that's used often interchangeably with Aboriginal. And so there was a way in which it became clear to me that, we can think about blackness as being descendants from Africans, but it's also a constructed social position. To be black is to be constructed as debased. And so in that way, I was able to connect with so much of the kitsch that they have, the objects. I don't think you can see particularly well here, but there's shells with little kitsch objects and maps and wooden things you hang on the wall and plates. And so in that way, because there's so many things in England with gollywogs, and then also in the United States, there's all these stereotypical cartoons. So in that way, we could relate. But Tony and his group of artists are in a kind of activist artist group called Propa Now. And they also identify, in a way, with African Americans or people of the diaspora, but they also identify with Native Americans in terms of having the land taken over. So it was interesting, it's not exactly the same thing to be black, Aboriginal, and African American in particular. So it was interesting to see how, we were able to connect. A lot of the Aboriginal movement is based on the civil rights movement in the U.S., so they knew the sort of well-known cast of characters here. And you find quotations from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. in Tony's work. So there are lots of cultural differences, but there's also a recognition of our similar construction of debasement that made it easy to communicate about his work.
I mean, I just find it a really interesting kind of conversation. I mean, I'm from England, and the history of, I guess, kind of post-colonial studies. If I think about the kind of the black art scene in the 80s in England, that was a very diverse movement. So the notion of blackness included people of South Asian heritage, East Asian.
That was new to me too.
As well as kind of Afro-Caribbean, African. So this idea of a kind of black identity seems to, for me, I mean, it's inclusive of Australia as well as a kind of colonial, former colonial territory.
Right.
But I find it interesting that there isn't always that conversation with the American experience.
No, we don't.
Or it's maybe one way,
that.
I think. Like, I feel like, I don't know. But
I don't know that anyone, like your average African American person, would identify someone from Pakistan and England as black, or know who Aboriginal people are, what they look like, or or where they are. I mean, this is something I learned because I've been privileged enough to go to college and be able to meet, people from different parts of the country. But that's something that should be in. We're all in our own little silos, fighting for what we can get, and so it's been nice to have a different opportunity to think about knowledge in that way. Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking.
Hi.
Hi.
I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the intimacy you experienced with the Geesbend ladies.
Yeah.
In their house.
Yeah. Let's see where they are. So, the intimacy of Geesbend. Yeah, these are mostly elderly African American women who I talk to. The younger ones are in their 50s and 40s. They live on the land that their ancestors lived on when they came here from Africa. They live on the plantations. They live in the houses that were constructed during World War II as government housing for them. They don't all have running water. They don't all have electricity. So I'm from LA, and I have had experiences. A lot of my family lives in the country in Oklahoma. It was still shocking to be there in the 2000s to see that these are the living conditions, and to see a lot of poverty and a lot of beauty at the same time was very inspiring to me, very moving, very emotional for me. And there's something about the women and how kind they were to me that I would call intimacy, to be in their spaces in that way. And, they're like, are you going to stay the night? We have a room for you. And it's like, oh, thank you. But, you don't want to impose. And so the kind of intimacy I felt there seemed very oppositional to the art world. And I wanted, in my writing about them, to bring out what is important to them, and that how they're not interested in these debates about modernism and ABEX. It doesn't mean anything to them. They laugh about when Bill Arnett, who was one of the main collectors of the work, came and said that you are making art, and they just start laughing because they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but this is just what we've been doing for decades. This is what our family does. So it was hard to figure out what to share, because I wanted them to be taken seriously, and not just be sort of patted on the head as mammies sewing quilts and rocking chairs, because I don't think that's who they are.
Did you? I guess I'm interested in how you set up the interview. Like, did they feed you, and or were you sitting with them while they were quilting? Or?
So I am friends with a woman who's a photographer named Linda Day Clark, and she several years before had gotten an assignment from the New York Times to film this annual family reunion that happens in Gee's Bend. Linda Day Clark is a photographer. She lives in Baltimore. She's Black, which helps. I knew that she'd been going to Gee's Bend, and I asked her if I could come with her one year, and then I called her, and she said, yeah, I'll meet you there. So that's how I was able to make that initial connection.
Was that after the Whitney show?
Yes. This was after the Whitney show. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, thanks
Hi.
for your talk.
Sure.
My name is Rose Salceda. I'm a PhD candidate in art history, and I specialize in Latino and African American art.
Where are you?
At UT Austin, I work with Cherie Smith.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know a bunch of people there, yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could talk more about your personal experience writing about artists of color within racialized histories and within like broader kind of dominant narratives of American art.
Yeah, personally.
You mentioned that in your talk a little bit.
Well, I think personally I just felt an imperative to do it because I had worked in museums and been really uncomfortable in meetings where multiculturalism and diversity, I don't know if people use those words very much anymore, but in the 90s, people really used those words. They also used a term that I hope no one uses, identity politics. And these were all very politically correct terms for what museums needed to do to get funding. So, you know, having been sitting at the table at a lot of these meetings at LACMA and worked at the National Gallery of Art in DC before that, I felt a personal imperative to try to tell the story from another point of view. There was a show that we had at LACMA in, I think, 97 of Art of the Harlem Renaissance, which came from England, the Hayworth Gallery, yeah. And so many people in the show, I'd be walking around and they'd say, oh, this must be the first show ever of African-American artists. And it wasn't, you know, even at LACMA it wasn't. And so that was part of my inspiration personally to try to write this book and to talk about the kinds of obstacles that artists of color experienced in just trying to do things that white artists had been able to do without a whole lot of questioning. Thinking about the idea of a Black abstract painter, which is like kind of being a unicorn, especially in the 1950s and 60s for the museum world. And so I wanted to talk about why is that a problem, historically. Why is it that in museums, many museums, if it's a Norman Lewis or a Bearden painting, it says that he's African American. When we look at Jackson Pollock, it just says American. What's that about? So it was, from working in museums, feeling like I've got to put something down. Writing is not easy for me. I'm not a naturally gifted writer at all. It's all about just kind of writing it. I keep a writing diary, so at least I'm writing it down, even if it's not in the book, it's written down, there's some record of it. It's a lot of rewrites, it's a lot of second guessing. Sometimes things come quickly, but usually I do struggle over every word because there's so much at stake. Yeah.
In your talk, you mentioned that that perhaps you've experienced some tension in writing about certain Black artists who don't want to be written or compared to other Black artists, or vice versa. Can you maybe relay an experience in that? Do you respect those wishes, or how do you?
So let's see. Yeah, I mean, I wrote a piece about an artist's work for his catalog and had talked about the work in relationship to other Black artists because those were the artists that came to mind. And he was not happy with that. He says, I really am influenced by this whole other set of people. And I said, okay. And he goes, but the collectors need to know that. So I said, okay, which I hadn't thought about. And so I had to figure out how to make both of us happy. And in some cases I looked and I said, now tell me how this person, give me a clue of what the connection is. And then that really helped. And it's like, okay, well, that's actually an interesting connection that wasn't obvious, and that's productive writing, I also had an artist who's a African-American man who's a ceramicist who wanted me to do the same kind of thing, of writing for a catalog, but he wanted me to write about him in relationship to other Black artists. And I said, there's no Black artists that are doing what you're doing. And he was really sad about that, like historically, this is new territory. I can't think of any legitimate connection I can make with a Black artist before you. And so he was really disappointed. And maybe I just couldn't think of one, but it just, he wanted it and I didn't see it. So I just never know, You want to give the artist what the artist needs to help survive. At the same time, it's my work. I have to put my name on it. It has to be something I stand behind and am proud of, and not just promotional, There's got to be something in there with teeth that makes it, I want people to read the work that I write and look at the image, and read the work and look at, there needs to be something there that gets things moving. I help artists write artist grants. A lot of the artists I've worked with have learning disabilities. They have dyslexia sometimes. They're like, and there's a bit of intimacy that you have to get to before they tell you. It's like, can you help me just write this, because I can't write it. And it's like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, anybody else? Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Oh, yeah. I have to speak close up, huh? Start? Yeah? Yeah. Hi. Thank you for inviting me to participate. So I guess the tone is going to shift quite a bit. Today I'm going to share just like a in-progress text that I'm still working on. And in many ways it's a experimentation for me too, so it's a new way of writing, so still figuring it out. The piece calls together a series of exchanges between myself and an artist who's based in New York and Paris. And I guess I'm going to start the paper by first playing a short video of hers titled A Lullaby, which uses a John Cage text also titled A Lullaby, and which was first performed in 1993. So Christine's kind of appropriation and rendition is a short 1.5-minute video. And it was made in Los Angeles in 2012 and is, in a way, the starting point of the text that I'll present. So it's about 1.5 minutes long. I need sound, yeah. Okay. Oh, I didn't mention it, I think. No, it's okay. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned, so. I think I forgot to mention to you. Okay. Yeah.
Everybody's got it.
Okay.
You're watching through the column dark.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so this is Christine Rebet's 2012 work, A Lullaby, with sound.
You're watching through the column dark. You're watching through the column dark. How can I reach you? You're watching through the column dark. You're watching through the column dark. How can I get through? Well, sometimes you feel like you never been loved, and sometimes you feel like you never loved, and sometimes you feel your whole world falling away. But hold on, and listen to what I say. There's music all around us. How can you say that you're down? There's music all around us. How can you say that you're down? You're swimming in a sea of fear, swimming in a sea of fear. How can I reach you? You're swimming in a sea of fear, swimming in a sea of fear. How can I get through? Well, sometimes you feel like you never been loved, and sometimes you feel like you never loved, and sometimes you feel your whole world falling away. But hold on, and listen to what I say. There's music all around us. How can you say that you're down? There's music all around us. How can you say that you're down?
John Cage's Lullaby, as told through a white parrot perched in front of a pink backdrop. An archive post on the website reddit.com reads, subject, A strange artistic video featuring a parakeet sitting against a colorful background, with a narrated poem being read in a Hispanic accent by a woman. Quote, "There is music all around you, and you are swimming in a sea of fear," are some poem stanzas. Submitted 6 months ago by Zaps in Her Pants. Post reads, "So I am a heavy purveyor of both Reddit and Imager, and I am unable to find this video. I have been looking for months whenever I get a chance." Visual. There is a bird, probably a parakeet or a parrot, staring at the camera. The bird isn't doing anything at all, just being, shows from various angles. There's a colorful background. I believe the video was entitled Lullaby, but I can't be sure. The video was strange and funny to me because it seemed to take itself very seriously. Audio. There is a lady who sounds young and is speaking in English with a Hispanic or South American accent, reading a poem. The poem is below in its entirety. The words to John Cage's Lullaby are then embedded in the post below, starting with the repetition, "You're watching through the cold and dark. You're watching through the cold and dark." If I may insert some background information here, the bird is not just being, but is actually eating a spoonful of peanut butter to create the illusion of mimicking Cage's words. Bonjour, Shoghig. I was writing you this morning, but had to go. So here's the email, finally. About the photographs, I have one picture, the one that was not sent in a box, but not the one in Oslo. I don't know where to look. I'll do them again. My printer seems to no longer be in New York. Here's the last cut of the parrot video with the edits we discussed. Let me know if you like it. Password version 3. Sweet show. I dreamt that we were stuck in an earthquake and that we were in separate rooms, you and I panicking and talking to each other. New York is tough, cold. I have a flu and try to keep the spirit up. I couldn't sleep and start to take tiny sleeping pills. I panic because of money, and I try to go back to my job. I went to have dinner with Ben. He's so great to spend time with. We went to a party, and every single girl walked to him as if they want to have sex. A déjà vu. I start to think more seriously of my projects, the animal one. I'm going to read George Orwell's Animal Farm on a dictatorship, then the Beirut musical. I don't like so much the curator that I work with now. She doesn't communicate, and when you're in front of her, you have to pull to have 2 words from her. It must be insecurity or something, but that is unnerving to work with. I bump into many people I know. It's okay. I try to take the rhythm and hope to work well on it. Big kisses, Christine. It is morning, and I'm stepping out on the metro at Hollywood and Vine, onto the stained Terrazzo Street. I am minutes from work, thinking about the kinds of relationships that are deemed justifiably dependent, and the others that are pushed to the margins as an accessory. As relationships built and temporarily sustained through, and because of practical circumstances like time and place. I am alone, and I am talking to someone. I often speak thoughts to a person or persons who are occupying space in my mind at the moment. Those thought and emotion-consuming friendships that exist beside you, no matter where each person lands. Spurts of ideas and anecdotes, snide remarks, snippets of advice that pop into my mind and pass through, then would disappear if it weren't for this correspondence between us to help me retain some of it, help it survive. Hello, Christine. It is so lovely to read about your day. I can hear your voice describing the city to me. I can imagine you in New York and understand a bit of what you are doing these days. It's important to think about the positive aspects of New York, knowing so many people there, the free studio for 2 months, Ben, the show. Ben is, of course, special, though seems to be a bit difficult. Do you even have enough space in your life for that much ego? I here have lost my romantic interest. I should say interest in him or them or all of it altogether. Kissing and flirting is often short-term, and I guess it's okay to lose your craving for romance. But I'm trying to remember that new people pop up in your life, and all that is important too. Romance, sex, play, the occasional distraction that can become the everyday, multiple times a day distraction. I went to Vegas with friends this weekend. What a horrible place to be. We quickly escaped to Michael Heiser's Double Negative. Short trips with friends somehow shift everything around, remind you that you can be a child again with others. I returned with a plan to focus this week. Of course, as usual, same old, same old. I just turned in an application to a curatorial assistant position in New York with a curator I met in Mexico City in 2010. She knows me, so maybe I have a better chance. When I get a new phone, I will call you to see how you are, what you're doing, to remind you to work, and be positive. I will watch the parrot video and let you know what I think. And sorry to hear about the photos. I talked to my sister today, and we checked to make sure that she returned them. I'm not sure how they got misplaced. The more I think about and discuss your practice, the more I think you should put your energy into these films. A big kiss, and we talk soon. With love, S. John Cage said, "It is useless to play lullabies for those who cannot sleep." So instead, Christine calls me late night to tell me about a celebrity bird trainer in Hollywood who is willing to work with her on the video. When they later meet, she calls to tell me about the peanut butter, a common trick in the industry. Just keeps its mouth moving up and down. My daily care needs include very little. I disdain this characteristic of mine, wishing the labor of care was distributed more evenly, while resenting a give-and-take dynamic consistently askew. I fear that care is an infantilizing term, and that my own subscription to the regime of willpower and positive thinking renders the potential of complaint and the possibilities that grow out of a heavy heart dull and insignificant. There are instances when positive thought has no sway, like in grad school when I was also caring for my dying father. I didn't share this fact with anyone I met during that time, thinking this other role I embodied on a morning, noon, and night basis was separate from and irrelevant to our group conversations around cultural theory. Years later, a future lover of mine would lay on top of me and slowly draw a line on my back, connecting one freckle to another, then another. Every so often she paused, looked down into my face, her sly, knowing smirk silently clarifying things for me. Salut, Shoghig. I am in my favorite flat in Republic, where now you have concerts nonstop until 4 a.m. Horrible. There is nobody in town. I try to concentrate for a few hours. I have been terribly disappointed with not getting ahead with my gallery, and lost 4 months not getting anywhere. Now I have to move on. I will go to Berlin and try to work and make new connections starting August, until I get my visa and go back to the US. I am very broke, though, and very nervous with getting to New York without any money, show, or situation. I haven't heard from you. Let me know how you are, what you're doing, how is love and work. I miss you, and you know where I would love to be right now. Kisses, Christine. P.S. Headlands Artist in Residence invited me to apply. The deadline is Friday, and as usual, I panic last minute. Would you have a look with me? I plan to continue with what I started with the Lullaby video. I would like to make a short poetic film essay, speculating on sciences, philosophy, and alchemy. The hypothesis will be articulated and lip-synced by live animals, voiced over by me, the artist in residence. Thank you, C. Dearest Christine, apologies for not writing more. I get so tired of this computer. I think New York and Columbia will be good for you. Don't you think it will be beneficial to have a position there, even if it's part-time? How is your new love? Are you attracted to him and charmed? Good to go for it, Christine. Kissing and art, Christine. I've attached some notes for headlands. I think you need to develop it quite a bit more. Today, I'm very sluggish. It is a hot day and I have injured myself, so I am not moving. Achy knees. I only read these days, nervously consuming and feeling stunted by hesitation over how to start and where to focus. Funny enough, I seem to be reading everything that mirrors, even heightens this anxiety, like Anne Carson stoically rearranging paper clips in her mother's kitchen, describing the different degrees of ice. It is so hard to find work and harder to work without collaboration. I think until I confuse myself, convince myself this idea is no good, bore myself, because I am only thinking to and for myself. I will write more tomorrow, but I wanted to send you my notes on the proposal so you can continue working. Love you and miss you very much, SSSSHO. I kept the daily experience of care out of the educational institution because I didn't fully trust it, wasn't able to relax my body into it. But here, in the curatorial, in this friendship, I let it take over. I care and I worry about her body here. I worry about the toll of administrative processes, of searching for funding, of applying for US residency. I worry that representation is compromised. I worry about class difference and the privilege to choose to say a word or two, to hold back or not. Friendships can be so dangerous, so resilient and antagonistic towards the contract, the deliverable. They are off balance, irreproducible, uneven, a mouthful. A summer earlier, Christine and Faisal, a mutual friend of ours, came to town and stayed for the month. This is when Rihanna's Money song had just come out on the radio, and one of Faisal's favorite things to do was to drive around in the used convertible he rented from Rent-A-Wreck. He consistently confused it as Rent-A-Shark, and play this song on repeat. Only ever singing the 4 words, "Still got my money." Jerking his head and arms around for an imagined public, how enthusiastically he would throw invisible money up into the air and out the convertible. At the time, he was installing 5 17-foot columns made of corkboard at Human Resources in Chinatown. Because he had no money, he asked for favor after favor. So I helped with installation, I helped with errands, helped with Home Depot runs, while negotiating my own compensation through rides across town, music downloads, educational rants on European politics, his orange juices in the mornings. In Paris, he was riding the gallery wave, and as a result, I felt his work was becoming quick, clever punchlines. So I gave him shit for being a pushover, being compliant, being cheap. My friendship promises to expose your exploitation. My friendship can illuminate your worth. Sweetie show. I just came back from a party I went to because David had a big article on Bridget Bardot, and I drank champagne with slightly older people. Merci for your note on the application. The deadline has passed, but they extended it, so finally I have time to spend on it. I'm always doing everything but what I should do. Tonight, I showed an art consultant and some friends my recent drawings. They loved it, yet it was quite humiliating, as they want to help with galleries, and you understand that people have no clue about how hard it is to be an artist. I'm just not in my element. I need money to build back my life in New York. I have lived a year without rent. Being poor is one thing, but at least I want to feel that I'm understood. I see the boy tomorrow and feeling perplexed. He is complex and demanding, and I have no clue why he falls for me. Sweet show. Keep the day relaxed, open, and on your side. Keep the world in a great shape for you. Big day, big kisses, C. On the anniversary of my father's passing from cancer, I receive an email from Christine. Subject says, "I'm thinking of you." All it contains is an attachment, a drawing of pink palm trees floating in the air, clustered together, with heads that seem to be mutated and multiplied, as if someone drew a palm tree, then grabbed it from the top and stretched it up towards the sky, giving it a top-heavy confidence. The image is captioned, String Marriage, Haiti. In a PDF on my desktop, I find her new works. Each image, again dressed with a childishly scribbled caption. I scroll through each page and swiftly read the words, as if they form one long sentence. I blame the sun, fishermen parade for mermaids, the hypnotist. Why are you so quiet now? Tornado, phantom plot, occasional discomfort, danger, where is my spirit? When it comes down to it, fascination takes a part of me. Fragment after fragment, forming one sentence to offer a bit of nonsense that helps me sleep. Cage's repetition. You're watching through the cold and dark. You're watching through the cold and dark. How can I reach you? You're watching through the cold and dark. You're watching through the cold and dark. How can I get through? Dearest Christine, your email makes me happy. Despite the struggles, you sound like you're in a lighter mood. It's true. People don't realize just how difficult this whole field is. I don't know if I should apply for jobs or residencies. Project ideas are getting muffled. I'm not even sure if I trust the curatorial field. Just imagine how it looks inside out. But I am trying to remind myself that it's okay to be here, to ask these questions, to be confused. To be honest, Christine, I have been thinking a lot about fear these days. You know, I think about you often. I hear your voice. I discovered that the application for the Rupert residency is extended to August. Maybe I can write and share my ideas with you. Maybe you should send me your Headlands edited version, a bit of administrative and creative support. Let me know how things went with the flirt. In exchange, some stories about love from me tomorrow. Again, and with music, love S.